Hello everybody! Welcome to the last episode of Side Hustle. Today I am answering your questions. We did a call out on Twitter and I also reached out to some of my friends and asked for your questions about side hustles. I'm just gonna get right to answering them. Question number 1. The last thing I want to do when I get home from work is hustle. How do I balance side projects and downtime? This actually is related to another question that I got, so I'm going to go ahead and read that one also, just to make sure that all the bases are being covered. How do you fit in self-care with a job and a side hustle? Because the work-personal life balance struggle is real. It is. So generally these questions are all asking, how do you fit in the time to do a side project the right way and not go crazy? Something that's really important to remember when you have a side hustle and you're trying to fit time in to make something happen is that every moment that you live is a choice that you're making about your time. And that kind of sucks. Like if you're really tired at the end of the workday, maybe the end of the workday isn't the time for you to be working on your side projects. Me personally, I cannot work on my projects during the week. It's impossible. I'm totally brain dead at the end of the day when I come home from work. And so I use my time during the week for more strategizing, mental planning things, writing lists, but largely the bulk of the work that I do for the podcast and for the YouTube series has been on the weekends. And that's been a major help just because I know that mentally I can separate the times out. Like during the week is when I am Alex at work, and on the weekends I am podcast Alex and YouTube Alex. And you just have to make that choice that that's how you're gonna spend your time. As far as balancing side hustles with self-care, this is gonna sound super cheesy, but I really consider my podcast a crucial element to self-care and to my self-care routine. I don't mean self-care like going and taking a bubble bath or like painting your nails or whatever. Those count, but when I think of self-care, I think of the everyday maintenance that you have to do in order to make sure you're living a balanced and happy life. So for me, that is cooking my food, going grocery shopping once a week, packing lunches, exercising after work a couple times a week. These are not things I necessarily want to do. And along with that, podcasting is not always something I want to do. But I know that if I can just do this, if I can just like take the medicine, I'm going to be so much happier in the long run. And so that's kind of just what I remember. Like you just got to do it, because I remember a year ago this time, I remember feeling really empty a lot of the time, and I just knew that there was a part of me that wasn't living up to what I could be, and that was because I wasn't doing something with audio. I knew that I was sleeping on this opportunity that I had. So yeah, I really consider my side projects a crucial element of my self-care. And that's not true of everybody, but that's my experience. Another question. How do you combat side hustle envy? Oh boy, that is so real. Oh my gosh. Very real. I run in a crowd of ladies who are incredibly motivated and creative and so good at what they do. And we all pump each other up and support each other's side hustles. And sometimes it can be really difficult to be a part of that group. And you start to compare your work to the work that they're doing. I have a friend who did a year-long hand lettering project. It was amazing. I would never do a year-long hand lettering project. I have terrible handwriting. But, you know, you find yourself seeing the success that other people get and the notoriety and, you know, just feeling a little bit jealous, a little bit like, oh, I wish I could have that. So what to do about it? I think that the way that I get past that is I imagine that they have reached the top of their game. They are the peak version of themselves. And I use that concept to imagine what the peak version of myself would be. and what the peak version of my project would be. What do I want my project to be? How do I want it to touch people? How do I want to influence people or to create a community around whatever I'm building? And I really focus on that. I hold a very specific vision in my head, and I try to work toward that whenever I can. So, when I'm sitting down to work on a podcast episode or record something or set up an interview, I'm always doing it with the dream goal in mind. That's just basically a very long and floofy way of saying that when I experience side hustle envy, I use it as fire under my butt to do more and be better. Also, shine theory is a thing. If you don't know what that is, look it up. When you are surrounded by people who are amazing and doing amazing things, you look more amazing too. So, I don't particularly feel threatened by the strengths of my friends. Rather, I tend to collaborate with them and draw upon their strength and charisma and creativity to make myself better and to make my project better and to serve my community more effectively. Okay. How do you manage to keep your side hustle a hobby and creative escape and not let it become an obligation that you resent? That's funny because I definitely have turned the podcast into an obligation that I sometimes resent. But like I said before, I really see the work that I do with my podcast as kind of taking a medicine, like taking a vitamin every week. It's something I have to do because I know that it's the crucial step that I have to take in order to live the life that I want to live, whatever that means. So if you have a project that you're working on and you find yourself beginning to resent it, maybe think about the reasons that you have the project to begin with. Why are you resenting it? Is it because it's taking up time? Is it because you're scared? Or is it because you really don't feel like the purpose of the project resonates with you anymore? If it's the last one, consider dropping it. It's okay. If a project ends, that doesn't mean that it failed. If you find yourself beginning to resent something and it's chronic and you don't experience that joy anymore, maybe consider stopping. How do you deal with the tenuous friend-favor relationship? Now, this is from somebody who has a friend with very specific talents that can be useful to their side hustle. The way that I have handled so far working with friends, I'm thinking specifically about my relationship with Sarah Lawrence. She is the designer for my podcast, so she designed the logo and a lot of other illustrations. I did pay her, but I think that I paid her a much smaller amount than what she deserved for the work that she did and for how significant her work has been to the podcast so far. But I make sure to give her immense credit whenever I get the chance. Every single episode I shout her out, and I've worked with her for various other aspects of the podcast. When I'm working with friends who have these creative crafts that are useful to my own project in some way, I always have to remind myself that this is the thing that they do as a job. And I may get a friend discount, but if they do a favor for me, I want to make sure that it's 150% worth their while to work with me. Next question. Why is side hustle a thing for so many women, but you don't hear about it for men, really? Okay, so I actually have a really great story about this. It's an okay story. But when I got my first job in DC, I found out that one of my new coworkers lived in my neighborhood, and we were all out at a bar. It was like my first week having started, and we found out that we lived in the same neighborhood, and I said, "Oh, awesome. We can get together and work on the weekends." And he looked at me like, "Work? Maybe brunch, but work?" And I felt so embarrassed. Among my group of friends and the type of people I tend to hang out with, Work dates are totally chill. They're totally a thing that people do. There's a light. Ugh. Is that better? Yeah, work dates are totally chill and a thing that people do in my sort of cluster of friends. And I think it's because we all have this kind of fire under our asses and we know that we have to work so freaking hard. I think in general, that's kind of the attitude at large for women who are kind of professional minded, creative, practical, business savvy. They do feel like they need to do so much more. That's my answer. It's really probably not satisfactory, but maybe it's because we all have our body clocks ticking and instead of having babies, we're having baby projects. I don't know. Yeah. How do you find the courage to make your side hustle a reality? And how easy is it to change creative direction once you start? Okay, starting a side hustle is really freaking scary. Especially when you are like putting it out into the universe or like posting it on Facebook. That's terrifying because all the people that you went to high school with are gonna see it and be like, oh, what's Alex working on now? That's so lame. That's what I was worried about. Like, I don't really care if the people who sort of know me now see what I'm doing, but for some reason I'm like, for some reason I think about the people I went to high school with when I'm posting on Facebook the most because those are the people I see on Facebook the most because Facebook algorithms suck. They probably don't see me as much because I'm not getting married and having babies. Wow, all right, sorry, backing up. Anyway. I feel like I might not be the best person to ask this question to though because I am kind of a chronic oversharer. Ever since I was in high school, I had some kind of blog or a side project where I was posting really, really personal things on the internet and then sharing it to Facebook or Twitter. Doing really creatively risky things that, you know, I kind of look back now and I'm kind of embarrassed sometimes about the things that I was doing. But I was trying to figure out who I was and take risks, and I eventually got here, but some of it was kind of embarrassing and I'm glad that it's not on the internet anymore. I think what the secret is that if you have a project that you're working on and you really believe in it, then you should stand behind it and you shouldn't feel ashamed or scared to post it on the internet and let people see it because that's the way that they're going to interact with it. And isn't that why you started it to begin with? I would suggest test driving rough drafts or early iterations of your project with a small group of friends if that makes you feel more comfortable. Or maybe if you're a part of a creative Facebook group, Dream Warriors is a great group. Femsplain has a contributors Facebook group and they also have FemSlack. Those would all be great places to post your project initially and kind of build up the momentum and build up your courage before you go public. So find a supportive community who's going to be able to cheer you on and maybe even give you some constructive criticism that you can receive in a kind way before you make yourself vulnerable to the masses. As far as pivoting, I have a whole episode on pivoting. I personally don't think it's that tough to pivot. The hardest part is thinking of the ways that you're going to pivot. So coming up with the ideas that are going to push your project to the next level and how you're going to iterate your project and your concept. The actual execution doesn't seem that difficult. You just do it. What else? Have you thought about monetizing or professionalizing your side hustle? Has anyone you've admired done that, and how? Yes and yes and yes. Let me start with people who I admire who have monetized their side hustles. Person number one, Anne Friedman. She is a freaking genius. A couple years ago, she started a newsletter on TinyLetter as a way to basically keep herself in the inboxes of editors. She was a freelance writer, and she wanted to make sure that everybody that she was in touch with kind of knew what she was up to, the kinds of things she was working on. So she created this newsletter called the Anne Friedman Weekly, and it comes out every Friday, and it's just a listing of links that she enjoyed, things she's written. Pretty easy. There's usually a GIF involved. But in the last few years, it has grown ridiculously because, you know, she does a really good job. She writes in a really authentic voice. She curates her links really, really well. And first, the newsletter grew to be larger than TinyLetter could handle, so she upgraded to MailChimp. And with that comes the cost of operating under MailChimp. TinyLetter's free, MailChimp is not. And so what she has done is she has created a classified section in her newsletter. Many thousands of people subscribe to her newsletter, and it's hugely influential. And so she has monetized this amazing little email that she sends out every week, and every ad is like $100, and it looks really cool. You kind of have this Anne Friedman cachet when your link is in the classified section of her newsletter, and it's such a retro concept, but it's brilliant. And so she has, 4 to 6 classified ads in every email. So it's like potentially $600. Crazy. Passive income. Genius. I have begun to explore monetizing the LadyCast. I've had a few conversations with some companies, some brands, and not there yet. I think that I want to work on building up the community and building up the concept of the podcast a little bit more before I finally get into actually monetizing it. So that's a conversation that you have to have with your heart based on your project. How do you know when your side hustle is ready to launch? And how do you convince yourself that your idea is worthy enough to launch? I think in this context, launch is being used as sort of a public presentation of the project. The word launch has a really heavy connotation, and it makes it seem like it requires this really big rollout over social media, and it kind of exposes you to the judgment of others. I don't particularly think that it needs to have that a launch needs to be that. A launch can just be the project existing. Granted, it's a lot easier to find and build a community online around a project if your name is attached to it, because you'll have all of those IRL connections that will come and see your project and share it with their friends, and that's kind of how you build a network. But if you don't feel confident in sharing it on, say, your personal Facebook page, you don't have to. You can create a Facebook page for your project itself, and you can run it anonymously, or you can just run it publicly, but maybe don't make a big announcement about it existing. I don't think that the focus on the launch necessarily needs to be so strong. I think that you should focus more on how you feel about your product. And if it's speaking to you, it will speak to other people. I believe that so strongly. If it's touching a very core, true part of yourself, then it will touch another person in that same kernel of truth. This is getting really dramatic, but I'm so serious. If it feeds you, then it's going to feed other people, and that's when you know that it's ready. Okay. These are all the questions I've got for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching this series. I've had a lot of fun, and I hope that you have too. I hope that everybody's learned something. I've learned a lot about YouTube, about filming videos, etc. I would love to hear from you guys if you continue working on your side hustles, or if you start a side hustle. Feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter at AlexLaughs, and the podcast, The LadyCast, is at The LadyCast. So I hope you keep hustling. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.